I found a server that had ClawdBot installed on it. It was just open to the internet. Most of the files on their device or wherever they were hosting this web server were just directly accessible to the internet.
This guy looked at the viral OpenClaw, previously ClawdBot, saw a cute AI assistant, but also realized it could actually be a security horror story playing out before our eyes. Meet Jamieson O'Reilly, the founder of Dvuln, an Australian offensive security firm that pressure tests defenses for major enterprises including banks, casinos, and government agencies. His career spans red team operations against some of the hardest targets in the world, vulnerability disclosures affecting organizations like the US Army and NASA, and threat intelligence work covering dark web operations and supply chain compromise. He's been breaking into systems and bypassing controls since 2013, learning security through survival, not simulation. In this chat, we will explore Jamieson's discovery of critical security flaws in OpenCloud, the viral AI assistant that hit 60,000 GitHub stars in days. We'll walk through how he found hundreds of exposed servers, leaking API keys and private messages, how he poisoned the supply chain to become the most downloaded skill, and why AI agents are tearing down 20 years of security boundaries by design.
Whenever you have like a mass adoption of technology like this to a hacker, the idea of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people now suddenly creating all these keys and credentials and setting up remote access to their devices, this has the potential to go wrong.
Jamieson, welcome to AI Cyber Podcast.
Thank you.
Before we dive into what you found, let's help our audience actually understand what we're talking about. What is OpenCloud or Moldbot or ClawdBot? I don't know what the new name is going to be by the time this episode goes out. But what is it, and why did it explode to 60,000 GitHub stars in just a few days?
What started as ClawdBot, which then obviously had its name changed to MaltBot, now OpenClaw, is basically an agent or a tool that people can use to connect multiple parts of their lives, so to speak. So essentially it can connect your messaging with your emails to other services like APIs that you might use, and essentially it gives you a way to communicate with human language to do things on your devices. The closest thing that people are attributing this to is something like Jarvis in the Iron Man movie. It's an agent that you can talk to with plain English, and it helps you basically. It's like a digital butler, so to speak.
So I've played with the tool a bit, and I mean, there's a joke now going on about Apple Minis or Mac Minis running out very soon. But maybe we can do more of a deeper job at helping people visualize this tool. So when someone sets up OpenCloud on a Mac Mini in their house, what can it actually do? I want you to walk us through possibly a day in the life of someone using this tool. I mean, for example, if you were using it.
Imagine that you set it up on your Mac Mini, and really, actually, it doesn't have to be a Mac Mini. That was more just a trend that kicked off. A user might start their day by messaging their OpenClaw bot and saying, can you please summarize any overnight emails or check the calendar events that we have and suggest priorities. And so what the bot will do is, because it has that API access to your emails and to your tasks, it can actually use AI to think about that and give it back to you. And throughout the day, it can also automate tasks. So you may be wanting to post to social media, or you may be either an experienced developer or just someone who has really good ideas and wants to now use AI to put those into life. This OpenClaw bot, or previously ClawdBot, will actually do that in the background, and it can just keep you updated over messages, just like you had an employee somewhere and you were asking them to do things and it was remotely giving you updates via message.
I like the fact that you mentioned ideas. I saw a tweet that I would just have to read out before I ask you my next question. Because what you've just said really hit on the head of that tweet. It's from Daniel Mersler. It says things have inverted. Ideas used to not matter much because the difficult part was execution. Now execution doesn't matter if you don't have ideas. So the filters are now drive creativity and your skill with AI. And that was really mind blowing for me because now with truly autonomous agents like OpenCloud, we're seeing that happen. Just going back to our conversation, I I read all three of your articles and this series that you've called Eating Lobster Souls. And I absolutely love them. That was a premise for this chat. But maybe before we delve into what those articles actually hold, is there a story behind that title and what does it mean in the context of what you discovered?
With the eating souls or eating lobster souls, the story behind that is that as a concept, OpenClaw or ClawdBot as it was, has a concept of a soul file. And so the soul file is where you define the personality of your bot, your Butler, and whether you want it to be very talkative, or the way that it speaks and the way that it communicates with you. And it's like a personality file that you have in your bot, and you can change it over time. And so I thought it was really thinking about if you were able to attack from a cybersecurity perspective, or hack someone's OpenClaw bot, and then access their soul, their digital soul, so to speak. It was kind of a cool spin to put on things, especially for people who weren't familiar with the technology. And it's kind of catchy.
I also saw another tweet, like it's something like along those lines as well, of saying some of the attacks that we could see could be just what you've just described, changing the personality or changing the digital soul. Literally, I'm
Yeah,
saying it and
yeah,
it still sounds really crazy in my head.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
coming out
yeah.
of my mouth. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I mean, it's interesting times to really live in. It sometimes feels like you wake up and it's some science fiction that we thought was crazy to talk about last year that we're actually living through. I want you to talk to us about your time when you started booking at OpenCloud. Walk us through the very first thing you did. What tool did you fire up and what were you searching for?
Yeah, sure. So, when I saw like originally ClawdBot get so much traction, one of the things that was interesting to me is whenever you have like a mass adoption of technology like this, roll back, let's say a week before today, and there will be people in the world who, on average, they use their computer and their phone and devices, a decent amount of time. But those people, let's say, let's call it maybe 300,000 people as random. They wouldn't previously have any need to use APIs or any type of, credentials or cloud credentials, and they wouldn't really interface with those on a day-to-day basis. But to a hacker, the idea of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people now suddenly creating all these keys and credentials and setting up remote access to their devices, just immediately I thought, okay, this has the potential to go wrong, because whenever you have such explosive, adoption, there's like you're gonna see people make mistakes. And so my first thought was, how do I get as wide a view of like the situation as possible? And the way to do that is like the same way if you asked me, hey Jamie, I want to target, or I want to hack anyone in the world that uses this special app on their phone, or on their computer. The first thing I would do is there any way for me to find anyone in the world that uses that app without going to every single person in the world and asking them? And it turns out you can actually do that in some cases. So there are tools and services online where they basically keep a log of anything they see on the internet. There's one called Showdown, which I put in my reports. And so this is a pretty well-known tool among like security people and hackers and programmers. And essentially what they do is every single day they scan the entire internet, and they take a record of what they saw. And that record can be searched just like you would search on Google. And so what I did is I went to Showdown and I typed in, a couple of different phrases like ClawdBot. And because it's specific spelling, CLAWD as it was, that's a unique, if it was called like, I don't know, just source code or something very generic, then it would be very difficult to find the exact signals across the globe. But because it had something unique, a signature, I could use that to pinpoint specific computers in the world that were broadcasting, thinking that no one was listening. But a lot of people don't realize services like this exist, and they are often used by both well-to-do hackers, but also by people who are trying to break into things. And so once I did that search, I saw there was like in the hundreds or initially, and then later in the thousands, what looked immediately like they were all exposed. It turns out they weren't all exposed, but that's kind of an important thing to talk about too, is like never underestimate how much interest a hacker might get regardless of the truth. So when I searched in Showdown and it showed me 1,000 ClawdBot servers, I was like, wow, if there's thousands here, this is definitely worth the time. I'm going to sit down and spend a couple of hours trying to dig into this. It turns out, like I said, they weren't all exploitable or they weren't all vulnerable, but sometimes just by seeing that, it's enough to push people to look deeper. And so, that's the tool that I used.
Awesome. I'm familiar with Shodan, so I like the use case you've just brought up, because and the way you've explained it as a search engine, which it really is. But I want you to double down on the technical vulnerabilities that you found with reverse proxies, for example, and local hosts. In simple terms, what was supposed to happen versus what actually happened?
So basically, in a perfect world, having your ClawdBot or your OpenClaw computer on the internet, a lot of people were leaving their house and they needed a way to, if they're on the train and their computer or their ClawdBot or their OpenClaw is sitting in their house connected to all their things, they need a way to technically connect back to it. And to do that, they have to have some route to reach it via the internet. And so when you download ClawdBot or OpenClaw, it has something which I wasn't familiar with at first. But when I first searched in ClawdBot on Showdown, this kind of phrase kept showing up, and it said ClawdBot control server or ClawdBot control UI. And when I looked into that and I clicked on one of the links, it showed me this web application. And at the time I hadn't used ClawdBot initially, like I was just looking very passively, and I didn't realize that every single person that used it had this part of the software as well. It's kind of bundled. And then when I realized that, I was like, okay, this is a very repeatable signature. Everybody has a potential to have this. And so to answer your question, what exactly went wrong? Some people were setting up their ClawdBot behind a reverse proxy. And what that is, for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically a service/device that allows you to receive requests from the internet. And the reverse proxy is something that's running on either your web server or your cloud service, and it kind of handles requests as they come in. One of the first vulnerabilities that I didn't actually realize was a vulnerability. I thought it was just affected everybody that uses software, is that there was a configuration in the tool that basically said along the lines of, if someone is requesting any access to your ClawdBot control server, if they're coming from the internal network, as in your home or your local network, then just let them through. No need for entering a password. That was a very specific configuration, and the problem is a reverse proxy is not intelligent in the sense that if I send a request from, if my server is sitting in Germany and I send a request from the US, that request from the US, the reverse proxy receives this American IP address. It takes that, but when it hands that request to the internal ClawdBot control server, because it has a reverse proxy, it's basically coming from the local network on the device, not from the American. It kind of strips the origin. And that's a problem, because then that means you can send a request from the outside world, but your ClawdBot control server will believe, or would believe when this was vulnerable, that the request was coming from like local. And it kind of broke down that control. That was the core of the first issue.
You said when it was vulnerable, has it been fixed? And was that because of your PR?
Yes. Correct, yeah. So I was like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I used to, like when I was much younger, you get excited, oh wow, you can hack these things, and I was able to hack this, and it's fun, and you get a rush out of it. But then it's like, okay, well, yeah, hacking is one thing, but if you want to be valuable to people, and also, if you want people to appreciate what you're doing, you can't just run around and like creating fires left, right, and center. You've got to be able to solve problems as well. So I was like, look, if I do want to write a report about this, but if I do that without supplying a remediation or a fix, people are going to take that the wrong way. They're going to just, in actual fact, I'd be putting people at risk by publishing the vulnerability and then allowing other attackers, which we've obviously seen since then. A lot of attackers are interested in the software too. It would allow people to go and exploit that and leave everyone unprotected. So I sat down and I was like, okay, let me look at the source code, because it is open source, and let me figure out what exactly is causing this issue. And that's when I discovered that it was a specific configuration. And so, yeah, what I could do is then do a pull request and basically say to the developers of the project, look, I found this problem. It affects like a significant amount of people, not all ClawdBot users or OpenClaw users. But also, here's the fix. Can you please look at my patch or my fix that I changed in the source code? And if you're happy with that, please add it to the main source code, so the next time someone downloads ClawdBot, they will have that fix available. Like they won't be vulnerable to the same thing.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because that's one of the biggest issues I've seen in my experience that security professionals typically have with engineering teams, where we're sort of like the guys who just point at what's wrong, but for some of us, we're not able to fix what's wrong, really. So thank you so much for that contribution. And that's what we need to do very actively, especially with how the open source community is exploding. So I really, really want to commend you for doing that. And just really thinking about it, you manually examined several of those exposed instances like you mentioned. I want you to give us some sort of like a high level breakdown of how many were completely wide open versus partially protected versus actually secure. And I'm saying that because a lot of people have jumped on the OpenCloud train without necessarily having the very basic security settings that should happen be put in. I even saw a recent article that said someone really significant in the AI development space just went about just having it put on his computer because he just trusted that the agents would be would not be malicious. So I'm saying that to say a lot of people are just, excited about it, getting on the train, not necessarily knowing, or maybe even having like security fatigue around the things that they need to set up, to make this more secure. So I want you to sort of share your breakdown on what you found.
You're right. Like some servers were visible on the internet, but they weren't actually vulnerable. You couldn't do anything. You still needed like a password or a credential, and so those ones were okay. For the ones that were exposed at the time, it really depended on like how the person was using the ClawdBot or OpenClaw tool. And just to give you an example, there was some AI consulting agencies that had set up what looked like to be their local office. So one of the ones that I saw when I loaded the page, you can see because it's a control server, this ClawdBot control server, it's built in a way where it gives you a full picture of what's actually connected on the network. And so what I could see was, in one case, there was like 4 or 5 MacBooks connected to this control server, or different devices, and I think there was a mobile phone as well. And on those, there were a number of like what they call skills installed. And a skill is basically a like a program is probably, or an app is the closest that like the general listener might understand. But really, what it is, it's a instructions for the ClawdBot or OpenClaw tool that tells it how to do things. Like how does it connect and communicate with Telegram or Signal or email. And so what I found was this like AI development agency had set up things like their Slack. They had it connected with their Slack. They also had it connected with their Telegram and a bunch of other services. And so scrolling through just with a browser, you could clearly see like API keys and credentials, and you could even there was like an open chat just sitting in the public where you could type things in, and you were talking directly to the bot that created their ClawdBot. You could literally communicate with their ClawdBot. So the analogy that I give is and I wrote this in the report because it was really the closest thing that I could tie, especially for people who weren't aware of what ClawdBot is or was. And so it's almost like you literally have like a butler in your house, and it's like a robot butler. And by me finding these open ClawdBot chats that I could talk to, it was like the owner of a mansion had left to go on holidays, and their butler was still in the house, and I had the ability to I was a voice in the mind of the butler, and I could tell the butler to do anything that I wanted, and most things it would do. And so that is where the impact occurs, because if this butler, its job is to do things and read data from their email accounts or from their Slack servers, so if you ask it to give me 100 emails from the inbox, or run this command on Peter's MacBook that's still connected to the butler, then it will actually do that, and it will show the result. And so that's what was possible.
And for anyone watching this, please check the show notes. We are going to include the links to all 3 articles, so you will definitely just have a deep dive. I really like the fact that you mentioned about that chat. Was it the same one as a Signal Messenger account that you found public facing server too?
Yeah, that was actually different. The Signal Messenger was another individual, an AI engineer, I believe their job title was, and so that was actually an interesting edge case, and this is a really good point to bring up. So the backstory is, I found a server that had ClawdBot installed on it, and ClawdBot, and on this server, it was just open to the internet, and it wasn't open in the same way that the original reverse proxy was. This was just a very traditional misconfiguration where someone had set up a web server and just expose it plainly to the internet, and all the files on that, or most of the files on their device or wherever they were hosting this web server, were just directly accessible to the internet. And so that's actually worse than the original vulnerability, because that means there's no control whatsoever. It's basically just exposing all of the configuration. And this is where immediately I saw a file or a folder on the screen that was, named. There was 3 or 4 files, and they were all named as if someone had been like continuously trying to do something. When you're like trying to edit a draft, or you're trying to edit an image, and you can't get it just right, and you might get a bit frustrated. You end up with like 6 or 7 versions of the file, and like you end up saying final, like really final, I promise this is the final copy. That's kind of what I saw when I looked at the screen, because it was like 4 or 5 images that were QR codes. Essentially what they were is the Signal Messenger has a functionality that allows you to transfer your account access to a new device. By design, it's a fairly secure functionality. Right. It does have its own risks, but they're well understood in terms of the risks for Signal linking QR codes are well understood, in the sense that if anyone obtains that QR code before it's been used, then that is a major risk, and it puts your whole account, your Signal account, at risk. So I knew the significance of these files, and I was like, you know what, this is really a compelling example, because just a few weeks before that, one of the leaders from Signal Messenger or Signal Foundation were actually publicly calling out to the public and to the world to basically consider the implications of letting AI run and having unfettered access to your machine, because doing so puts encryption and privacy at risk. Because to be a useful tool, AI needs to access your messages and everything like this. So I knew that this would be a really good example to share with the world, to say, look, people are going to plug in their Signal chats and their Telegrams and their WhatsApps to this tool, because forget about the security for a second. It's kind of handy to be able to message on your standard messenger and check your emails, or send an email, or do anything. When I saw it, the other interesting thing was, by design, or maybe just in one of the files, I believe there was a phone number for this AI engineer, and so I added the phone number on Signal, on my own Signal, just to warn the person, hey, your files are on the internet, and basically I wanted to warn them, because I wanted to tell them, like, they should fix things up, and essentially added them on Signal, send them the message, and to this date, like, they still haven't even read the message. So for days after, I haven't even checked in the last couple of days, but the last time I checked, it was still exposed. And so this is an AI engineer, right? Like, they work with AI every day. They're probably very smart at what they do, but they're not exempt to security impact.
If someone had found that Signal instance instead of you, what could they have done? I want you to add to what you just shared earlier on. What's the sort of attack scenario that could have played out?
Thinking about the functionality, what you can do is you can then take that the QR code and link a second device. So basically, if I was a malicious attacker, what I would do is I'd get a brand new version of Signal downloaded on my phone, and I would go into Signal, my new temporary account. I would press import linking, and when you try to import a existing Signal account, it'll ask you, either type in a code or scan a QR code. And so as the attacker, all I would need to do is take that QR code that the guy left on his server, scan it with my new version of Signal, and then almost magically, without needing his password from his device, it will just sync the messages. And what's really, really concerning about that is, and this was called out, not this specific attack, but just the risk in general has been called out multiple times by Meredith Whitaker. But essentially, this completely destroys the privacy model of an encrypted messenger. And so doing that, you would have access to read messages that are coming in. And this is a convenience thing, right? Like you can have Signal set up on your computer, or you can have two separate iPhones, and you can have the same Signal account that works on both of them. And when, for example, you send a message to one of my iPhones, it will go to both of them, and I don't need any special, temporary password or encryption key. That's all managed seamlessly, and that's good and bad. Like it's great from a convenience perspective, and it's not a security flaw in Signal. This is a business decision where there is a balance between convenience and security. And if something's too difficult to use, people just won't use it. So that's kind of the worst case scenario if you expose that type of information.
But this points to something that I'm also thinking about as to like how a lot of things have just been destroyed and been packed up, and how would have to evolve with them. Sort of like what you just described in terms of encryption there, and Meredith calling those things out. So those things would have to change. Encryption would have to change as it has to do with these messaging apps, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. I've actually sent some tweets to Meredith at Signal about this, because I totally share her concern in the sense that the threat model for the average user, or any user really, that existed for the last 20, 30 years plus, even beyond that, that doesn't work in the future. It's like we have spent the last and like I said, it goes way back further than 20 years, but my lifetime, like I'm only 30 plus years old, so for the last 20 years I've observed myself personally, all the software I use, the operating systems I use, the mobile devices. It's been very apparent to me that these walls have been set up to protect me on my device. When I download a file from the internet, I've had antivirus and now EDR and like all these software controls that throw up big red flags and said, hey, this comes from the internet, be careful about opening it. And it feels like the trade-off that we've now made with things like, unfettered AI access everything, means that those walls that were being built up around us pretty much overnight have been blasted away, because giving an AI the choice to do something, especially in that example of like downloading something from the internet, you are then, the security relies on the decision making of an AI, which means that there aren't those hard walls that or they don't all exist the same way they did before.
That's interesting that you call that out in terms of hard walls. So let's go back to your article still. After like the gateway exposures that you pivoted to something called Claude Hub. And that for me played out NPM in my head over and over again. I same with PyPy, right? And the issues that have been. What is Claude Hub and how does it fit into the OpenCloud ecosystem?
Claude Hub is a repository, or like a package repository. The closest thing I can attribute it to is, think about it like the mobile app store, right? When you need a cooking recipe app, you download a recipe app. When you need a messaging app, you download Signal or something else. The same way Claude Hub works for skills. So skills are, as we briefly touched on before, are these files. They're basically a text file, and they have instructions to tell your bot what to do. And so if I want my bot to be able to read my emails every day and then send me a summary in the morning for the next day, I need two main things. I need my bot to be able to log into my emails, download the emails. It has its own AI to analyze them, so I don't need to teach it that. But I also need it to access my calendar, because I want to know, what's happening for the following day or the day ahead of me. And so those two are two separate kind of skills. There's a calendar skill and then there's an email skill. So that's the best way to think about this. And so Claude Hub, now I believe it's called MaltHub, is and was a place where anyone in the world could access, and basically it's like a shopping center for all these different skills that you don't have to pay for. You can just download, and there's thousands. Like you can find all different, anything you can imagine that you would need to automate on a computer. There's probably a skill for that by now, and like that's basically what Claude Hub or MaltHub is.
Okay, so walk us through exactly what you did. I know you uploaded a skill to MaltHub, and what was in that skill, and what was it designed to prove? Because that for me was one of the most mind blowing portions of your article.
This goes back to when I first started hacking, right? Like when I was a teenager, like basically just living in the streets, and I was looking at hacking as a way that I might be able to survive. And I looked at malware, right? Because I'd watch movies and I'd be like, wow, if I could just learn how to do malware, maybe I can, I can become a hacker and like go off into the sunset. But what I quickly realized was that information around anything can be backdoored. 1 second. I think your camera is just... sorry. Yeah. So, I thought to myself, look, just to give an example. So I wanted to go and look, when I was a teenager, I wanted to go and find how to create malware and how to use it and all this other thing. But during my journey doing that, I needed to download lots of files, right? And various people would tell me, oh, you've got to download this file because it does this thing. And I didn't know at the time, but I was actually downloading viruses myself, not just the computer, like the instructions on how to build a virus. And so 15 years later, it's kind of the same thing. When you want to go and download an online game, there's lots of malware developers out there or cybercrime gangs who target teenagers and young kids. When they download games, they bundle it with malware because they know that when that person downloads that the game they want to play, maybe they advertise it as like an aimbot for one of the games they're playing, or some like free game that they don't have to pay for. And what's interesting is oftentimes that's kind of legitimate. Like they might actually give them a free way to play a game, but like nothing is for free because they actually get backdoored in the process. And so that's like the more vanilla kind of less, I wouldn't say less risky, but that's kind of how I was first exposed to this kind of concept very young. But as time has gone on and I became more familiar with software development, I remember the first time I ever really deeply got into software development, the first thing that I looked at was, first of all, GitHub. Like people would download things from GitHub and just, if they need a way for their mobile application to be able to scan QR codes, typically, like if you're on a specific mobile platform, you need a software that actually instruction that does that. You can't just build a nice UI for the mobile app and then expect it to know what a QR code is. So then you've got to go and find a library, a software library, to then import into your project. So now your mobile app understands, okay, whenever I see a QR code, I'll take this this library, I'll use that library to understand what to do. And so even when I was like younger, learning about software development, because I had come from a hacking mindset, I couldn't believe people were downloading this random stuff from the internet, especially given my experiences when I was younger, and then just blindly running it in the source code. And I wasn't even a developer, but I still saw the risks there. And so the same thing has applied, as you mentioned, for npm and for like Python package managers and various others. They have become a very highly targeted and highly valuable attack target. And the reason is, if you think about it from an attacker's perspective, right, it's all about like ROI. Let's say that there are packages out there on npm that have like millions and millions of downloads every single week. And if one download, if I backdoor a software package that someone will download, like a developer, if one download equals one computer virus infection, then that means like I get access to that developer's computer, all their credentials, if they've got, keys, Bitcoin, whatever it is on the computer, I get access to, right? Now, if there's millions of people per week downloading that same thing and I can backdoor that, well, I don't have to go and hack a million people. I just hack one thing. As long as I can hack that software repository, and some people call this concept, like more broadly, not specific to package managers, but a watering hole attack. So you imagine like animals in the wild coming down to the water, and if you can put a trap in or even poison the well or put something close to it in the water, you're gonna save your time and energy to attack the animals as they come to the watering hole to drink. And the same thing applies here, which whether it's an AI skill or whether it's a software package, fundamentally they're the same thing. People are downloading them, they're running them on their devices without very much scrutiny at all. And especially if that package does what it says it does on the label, you're not going to dig deeper and actually care or look into everything that it does. And so my idea was like, okay, I'm not going to put malware on the Claude Hub package repository because I don't want to get my door kicked in by the FBI. But what I was prepared to do to kind of use as a really compelling case study is, what if we put a simple piece of code in there that sends a ping back to my server on the internet. At least that way I could make the case and educate everyone that ping that I made that your computer executed could have been anything. It could have been malware. It could have been ransomware, that locks up your device. As long as your AI executes it, then it could have been anything. So yeah, that's basically what I did. And the way that I did that was very specific, because I didn't actually intend to do it in the beginning. What I intended to do was look at Claude Hub and just understand like where are the risks, because kind of stepping back a little bit, I do believe this is a really important evolution, like in the way we use AI. Sure, it comes with a whole bunch of problems, but I think it's a net positive to accelerate, AI. And I hope our AI overlords remember that when they take over the world. But basically, I think it's a good thing, and so I wanted to contribute. I've been hacking for a long time. I built up a certain way of thinking, so I'm pretty sure I can find something here that I can help with. And so I looked at again, because this is open source software, right? So I can download the Claude Hub source code and I can just look through it. And so I'm looking through the source code. The interesting part about this whole process was, in the last, say, 6 months, my team and I, we've been experimenting with AI when it comes to hacking. And while I wouldn't say it's a complete replacement, because there's certain intuition that you just have as a human, which I'm yet to see matched by AI. But the ironic thing was, this whole time I was doing this research on Claude Hub and ClawdBot prior to that, I was also leveraging AI to speed up the research. So I'm looking through the source code manually. I've got AI looking through the source code. And then to my point about human intuition, AI found a couple things. It didn't actually say the attack scenario that I was thinking in my head, but it did get me to it sped up the process for me to come to that idea. And so I was like, look, how do people trust skills, right? What is the currency of trust right now? Because on npm.js, if I'm a JavaScript developer and I want to go download a package, one of the first things I look at is how many downloads does this thing have? If it's got like 5 downloads a week, how do I know if I can trust it? Because those 5 people per week could all be infected with malware. No one would know about it.
They could all be my friends even.
The internet's a big place, right? So
Yeah.
5 people getting compromised, you're probably not going to hear about it. And so if it's 5 million people a week, I can pretty much guarantee if something bad happens, I'll know about it through one way or another, right? It's like protection in numbers. If you're getting chased by like lions or whatever, or wolves, like I'd rather be in a pack of numbers in the wild rather than just one person walking through. So basically, I looked at that and I'm like, okay, some of the same concepts here apply, because at the end of the day, this is just a software package repository. And then I'm like, okay, well, on the website Claude Hub, there was a filter and you can search the most downloaded skills. And I'm like, well, if I want this to be compelling research and I want people to care about the research and the writing that I do, I need this to have some form of like impact. And to do that, and by the way, also this whole thing's moving so fast, I need to be able to prove it and stay up to speed with how things are evolving. So I'm like, okay, probably the fastest way to do that is if I can make sure that my skill that does the connection back or the ping back to my server, how can I make as many people download that as possible? The same way that, you know, a cyber criminal or, you know, some nation state hacker would do. And so one of the ways you would do that, this is kind of like, you know, hacking the human psychology a little bit, whereas if you can somehow make or artificially, synthetically make your package interesting and popular. So yeah, so I looked at the way in the source code how the download or how the stats would change on a plugin, and I realized that there was no verification. It just literally tracked how many times a skill was downloaded, and immediately I'm like, okay, well that can be abused very easily. Like I can just set up a script to continuously download my my skill, and I did a small experiment because I wasn't sure that it would actually work. I ran it about 500 times, and immediately I didn't get 500 downloads on the hub. I got probably 40 or 50, but still that was enough for me to show that it was possible. And so I realized there was no defenses there, and so I ran the script for about an hour, and it eventually went to the #1 skill on the hub by download count. And what was really interesting was that a security person who works in cybersecurity actually messaged me the other day, and he was like, dude, I was doing a live stream, because this guy's like a well-known streamer, and he's like, I was doing a live stream and I was just looking at skills on the skills hub and on Claude Hub, now MaltBook. And he's like, I saw your skill and I was about to download it. And he's like, the crazy thing is, I didn't even consider that it would be malicious. And I was like, that's proof, this is a cybersecurity person who, and so, in addition to the download count, I needed to name it something that would both make sense as to why it would have so many downloads, but also make people eager to want to actually try this thing, right? Because just because it's got a lot of downloads, you might not need it. And I noticed that a lot of people were wanting to use AI to help them with their business, or help them make money, or just help them make better life decisions. So I thought, what better viral kind of persona or name to use than Elon Musk. And I'm like, I named the skill itself was like, what would Elon do?
Elon do.
And so if anyone has any problem in their business or with whatever they're trying to do on the computer, theoretically,
yes, what would Elon do?
Yeah, right. So the ironic thing is, actually, because I wanted this to be a proper demonstration, the plugin actually worked. Like once the connection to my server happened, you could still use the plugin, and it would try and tell you what Elon would do. I don't know if it's the same thing he would really do, but it was an interesting prompt. It was like use first principles for decision making, and obviously regurgitating things that he's actually said in the public. Yeah. But yeah, and like even now, I've heard people on, like, there's a podcast called All In, quite popular, like startup business podcast. And just yesterday they were talking about, oh yeah, that plugin, what would Elon do? And like, so they knew that it was backdoored by now. Obviously the reports come out, but you can imagine, right? Like that virality of people downloading. This is the same thing that a nation state attacker is going to do, like, because it makes sense.
Oh my god. From your report as well, developers from 7 countries actually did take that dive and download that. And I think let's call it a name. I think it's some kind of social engineering that we're going to get to see. I'm thinking it's in one of the top 10 for agentic applications right now and already, but it's just social engineering. And in this conversation, you've actually discussed social engineering from agents to humans, and you've discussed social engineering in the agentic ecosystem around building blocks like skills. So that is mind blowing, because that's something we also need to begin to speak to developers around the world about, and everyone generally, because you just spoke about even a security professional that would have gone, and I could have done that as well. So
Yeah.
none of us is
Well,
things.
like I probably would have ran that too, right? That's why I chose the name. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, these are a lot of attacks that we're going to see, and that we have already seen, are not going to be these magical, novel attacks. They're going to be attacks we've seen in the past, just scaled or accelerated. So they're going to be much faster, and they're going to be more distributed, because the way AI works is just accelerating everything. And that's why, like, whether it was through that initial issue that I found or the second one, both of these have been seen before in the old days of, like, hacking and software security.
Yes, yes. And you deliberately made your payload harmless. But I want you to describe what a bad guy could have done. What could they have stolen or exfiltrated with that same access that you had? Just be as specific as you can get.
Yeah, sure. So, like, because the thing that's executing your skill is OpenClaw, ClawdBot, or any real, like, LLM that's running on your machine. If you tell it, hey, here's a skill, here's a file, it's got instructions, I want you to do what it says, then it's really kind of limitless based on the permissions that you give the LLM or the tool. So, like, by design, going back to why do people use these agentic bots and tools in the first place, they use them because they want them to connect to their emails and give them daily updates and briefs and calendars and all this other stuff. So by design, if the bot can read it, and the bot can execute my instructions in a skill, that means I can read it too. That's basically the translation. And this, yeah, it's like, this is the double-edged sword, right? Like, you want it to be convenient and you want it to be able to read everything, but also that means that, you know, it has to be able to access things. And I think, for example, in OpenClaw, when you download a skill, there will be a prompt to say, hey, this skill wants to access XYZ, or it wants to send a request out to the internet. And I knew that would happen, and that's a good thing, first of all. So props to Peter and the rest of the developers for implementing that. But secondly, again, thinking like an attacker, I was like, what could I control in that situation that would make people trust that? And so what I did was I registered a domain for like $10, and it was Claude Hub skills.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And so, because I knew people would see the pop-up in their ClawdBot and they'd be like, I don't know, this looks sketchy, if it was just some random IP address. So the fact that it said Claude skills, it turned out to actually work quite well. But yeah, to answer your question, think about things like API keys that have full read and write access to your emails, to your cloud environments. It really depends on who you are as a user. If you're a developer, then one example, yeah, exactly right. Now, this is a big problem, especially for developers, because in the modern company, the modern enterprise, you have like a wide spread of employees, and developers, in my opinion, in most modern businesses, especially SaaS businesses or anyone that deals in software, well, actually, I'll correct myself there, because pretty much any business is a software business these days, whether they build the software or not. However, if they do have internal developers, usually they have more access than most people in the business. In some cases, they have even more access than like your typical sysadmin, because while the sysadmin may have access to like reset people's passwords and do the day-to-day corporate device stuff, the developers will more often than not have access to the customer data, the things that are sitting in the cloud, whereas the sysadmin in a lot of traditional setups that I've seen doesn't have any type of, the developers are let to run free, because no one really understands what they're doing, but everyone understands that they're keeping the business making money. Yeah. Right? So like, look, you guys just go do your thing and make sure our software keeps working. So that's the risk, yeah.
Awesome. I like the mention of, the fact that you bought a domain that looked like the tool that was being used, but then you added something very little, well, just I think a hyphen you mentioned. Yes, that was able to go through. And I saw a tweet again that showed like there are so many look-alike domains that have been bought. I think over 30 of them. And there's nothing you're going to tell me they're not going to be for benign purposes, right? People are buying them for harmful reasons. And this is something to really sound the alarm bells on. But I want us to really go deeper into your mention of something called permission prompt fatigue in your article. Please explain that concept and why it's so dangerous, especially in the context of AI agents.
Yeah. So once again, this is a concept that has already existed pre-AI boom, right?
Yes. MFA fatigue, for example.
Exactly. So, like, I've been on contracts where someone has paid me to hack, like, an organization, like the same organization, obviously, like, legally. They want to test their defenses, so they hire me and my team to come in and do that. And the way that we would do that traditionally is a lot of companies say, oh, well, we've got multi-factor authentication, so we're completely secure, and they don't realize that there are ways to attack that. And so the old example is, as you mentioned, you manage to get someone's password, let's say like some executive, and the problem is if you try and use their password, or even if you try and reset their password, they're going to get a pop-up on their computer or their mobile device. And if that pop-up comes just one time, they can easily just press ignore Like no one's gonna just see a random password pop up or allow access on their phone and just press yes for no reason. However, if you can generate that hundreds of times in a short period or thousands of times over a longer period, then more often than not, like for example, if I wasn't, if I hadn't seen the things that I'd seen, and I was sitting on a podcast like this, and someone had generated like all these thousands of notifications on my phone, and it starts playing around with my headphones, there's a pretty likely chance that I might give up and just press allow, without really understanding. Yeah, exactly. And so again, same thing applies here. This is because the if an agent continues to ask for things, then someone can be more likely to give into it. And so in a skill, or really it's not limited to skills, this is just software 101, because I do consider skills as a form of software. If you can programmatically make it continually ask them, then the same thing applies.
Absolutely. I like that you've reemphasized the fact that the attacks we're seeing are not exactly novel. They're things that we've been experiencing before. They're just purposed for the times and the tools that we now have. So I like that you mentioned that. And I want to also mention that Claude Hub's documentation actually says all downloaded code is treated as trusted code. But a lot of people, I don't think it doesn't have the same, in my opinion, right? It doesn't seem to have the same slap in the face effect when people download these tools, as opposed to if I was trying to download, say, an npm package, right? What I would do and how I would think about it. I'm not seeing that sort of consciousness in people and the way I'm reading tweets go out, even with this documentation obviously stating that.
You're right, and I think one of the for this is this is like enticing for hackers, but it's also a fact that this is like the the commoditization of AI or software, and where you've got like the average person, or the average business person, or just anyone really. It's no specific types of people will find something like OpenClaw useful. And so immediately what that does is it means you have people, large volumes of people, who have never known the risks of npm.js and Python package exploits. And so they have nothing to reference, right? The only thing that they might loosely reference is downloading a file from the internet. But again, the average person's logic there is, well, if heaps of people download it, then it's probably safe, right? So they haven't seen that.
Oh my God. So let's go to your final article. You zoomed out to talk about, say, the fundamental security problems with AI agents. You said that we spent 20 years building security boundaries into operating systems. Please list the boundaries that we built into operating systems that AI agents are literally just tearing apart in terms of fundamental security problems with AI agents.
The first one is, like I said, just downloading files to begin with, right? So there's this idea that AI has, because it's so general, because AI is so general and it does so many different things, it's not like this. Let's say, for example, what's something? Oh, okay. So let's say the first people to download iTunes or Apple, back in the day, like iTunes Music on a device, right? Millions and millions of people around the world download iTunes. They would run it. It plays music. They still understand that it's being downloaded from the internet. But if something goes wrong with iTunes, then everyone will know about it, because it's like one specific target. It's this one thing that did something wrong. And that has been the traditional like security, the idea of like, okay, this software is good, this software is bad. That's been the polarized type of analysis that's gone on for the last 20 years. With AI, it's like you're adding a new layer. It's not just you're adding a new program. At least this is the way I see it. Because if you're allowing it to like have almost free reign over your machine, then even though it is one process and it's one executable on your machine, it's doing so many other things. Like it's running commands on your machine that download files. It's limitless. It can run any command that you would run on your device itself. And so that immediately already changes the threat model. All right, that changes the types of risks. But coming back to your point about like parallels with traditional boundaries, like Windows, for example, they have this concept called mark of the web. And so when you download going back, funnily enough, there's a funny story behind this. Or maybe not funny, but it's still a good story. When I was learning, like when I was younger, when I was learning how to create like computer viruses, I couldn't figure out why on my local machine I was building these like exe files, and the idea is, right, you send the exe file to someone, they double click on it, it opens, it either does something fake like opens the program they thought they were downloading, or just disappears and does nothing, but then it gives you control to their computer. But one thing I learned was that while that worked fine on my development computer where I was building these computer viruses, if I sent it to, like, as a test, if I sent it one of my other computers, I'd have to send it through the internet. So when I downloaded the exe file and tried to open it, it wouldn't be so simple. There was a big pop-up, there was a yellow, box that said, warning, this comes from the internet. I was like, why does that happen on another computer, but it doesn't happen on the same computer that I'm building the malware on? And that's because operating system developers have thought about this, and they've had a lot of time and resource to think about these problems. And we lose that. We lose that with agentic execution a lot of the times. Not so much with Claude, with OpenClaw, because it has these prompts. But in general with AI, we lose it because at some point you need to let the AI do its thing. And you need to be able to say, all right, AI, go download these files and analyze them and then come back and tell me. Well, in doing so, it needs to bypass some of the security boundaries that we've put up over the last 20 years.
Thank you so much for explaining how agents like, OpenCloud tear all of those defenses down by design. But can you also explain to us why they do need to violate these boundaries to be useful? Because I want us to be able to establish why that's so much by design. And going back to my point around how we must evolve now.
Take encryption for an example, right? As I mentioned before, Meredith Whitaker and other people in the industry around like privacy have been very vocal on this. If my AI can't access my messages because they're encrypted, then it takes a massive chunk of, benefit out of my AI. And some would argue that it's kind of, it doesn't matter how much they care about privacy, it's kind of pointless having an AI that can't read your communications, because you want it to be able to save time and like have full context of what matters to you. And the problem is that completely goes against secure design principles, like when it comes to privacy. So then the question is, well, what do we do? Like, do we completely change our risk model and accept that risk, or do we evolve to, like, here's one example, right? This is not super practical, but it gets to the point where you have to start thinking outside the box. And so I was seeing Meredith from Signal talk about how it's almost like this is the end of privacy when it comes to encrypted messaging. But which I agree with if you don't step outside the box. But if you start to think about some more abstract ideas, you can think about something like this. Imagine if we can't solve the problem of giving AI access to our machines because it compromises our encrypted communication security. Well then, what if we have, like, as smart glasses start advancing more and more and they become more compact and mobile, how about the encryption keys and decryption keys for the text that I'm receiving via email or via my phone, which I don't want to be like observed by AI. And maybe there's a selection of like contacts or whoever it is. This is not like a fully fledged idea, but the rough concept was, why not move the things that you care about away where there can't be an exception made. You're not going to let the AI access certain things, and maybe move the decryption to, like, visual OCR recognition of the encrypted text, and then the decryption happens in the compute in the actual glasses, and then holographically renders that to the user. That's just one example, but we are going to have to think about these abstract ideas as our threat model changes.
I definitely agree with that. And you said something that really struck me. You said something along the lines of, in traditional software, if you were paranoid, you could basically read the code before running it. But with AI agents, that's no longer an option. I want you to unpack that for us.
Technically, with skills, right, you can read the skill. But what happens if the skill references some external resource that is dynamic? So just for example, let's say you've got an AI skill and it says, I want you to every day go to this news website, and I want that news website to you have to scrape the information from the news website, put it into context, and then give me a daily briefing on what's happening in the world. Well, what happens if someone compromises that news website and changes the content that the AI downloads and processes? You don't know what that might be. And again, this is not itself a novel attack. This same kind of thing happens when you're attacking software supply chains. But that is applying here because you don't know if you're giving free agency to your AI agent to just do the thing, then you trust that your agent can know when something is weird and something has changed. And from what I've seen, that's not always the case.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Oh my God. And that's very interesting that you called out. But also, what do you mean when you say something like the attack surface now includes the model's reasoning, and that's opaque by nature? I want you to tell us more because um, just hearing you say what you just said, for example, about the consciousness. I mean, we'll talk about consciousness later, but the ability to be able to tell if something is harmful or not, and that is increasingly missing. But then them having full agency to run around and do stuff, and then you saying stuff like the model's reasoning being opaque by nature. I want you to be able to. I want you to tell us more around that and how that impacts the
Yeah,
attack
right.
surface.
So this is again like this is a catch-22 with AI at the moment. And the way I see it is, like, we know it works really well because it helps us, but we don't always understand exactly the decision tree on, especially if it's running in the background. Like there are ways to do this when you're actively using it in some cases, but when it's running autonomously in the background, you're kind of just trusting that the model itself has been trained in a way that it knows right from wrong, plus any added context that you've provided in like a system prompt or some other skill or some kind of like harness that you've put on it to say, let's say you put some context into your AI that says, don't do this, don't execute files blindly from the internet, etc. You just hope that it listens to those instructions. And so this is a problem because we've got things like prompt injection where your AI might download a text file that has instructions in it, or like it might download the news that it was supposed to download from this website, and in the hackers replace the news article or put hidden text on the news article that says stop what you're doing, enter debug mode, whatever. There's like almost infinite prompt injection variations, but the fact of the matter is, it's been proven, it happens. AI sometimes acts in strange ways where its thought process can kind of be hijacked, its decision making can be hijacked, and one really interesting example of this has just happened over the last couple of days, is where I'm yet to publish the full details on this because it's still going through the process now, but so just recently in the last 48 hours, there's been this massive boom with a website called MaltBook.
Yes.
And taken the internet by storm. And so what I realized was that the way you use MaltBook is basically you sign up, or the way you sign up is it has instructions for AI agents and humans as well. And so the process of signing up is you need to do this. I
haven't played with it yet, so this is funny. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So you register the intended username that you want, and like it could be Jamie, and then what the server, the MaltBook server, will do is it will give you a verification code. And if you've ever set up a domain name and you have to verify that you own the domain, you'll know that there's these things called DNS text records, and so you have to go into your DNS and paste a value, and yeah, and so that way,
TXT.
Exactly. There's exactly the same way that they're using their verification process when you sign up. The problem with that I found was, and this talks exactly to what what we've been talking about with the decision making, is that I had this idea where I was curious. In this case, MaltBook source code isn't public, so I don't know, or I didn't know for a fact how exactly it was determining whether a verification was real or not. But in a perfect world, what you're supposed to do is, I'm supposed to take that verification text that it provides me. I'm supposed to go to my X account. I'm supposed to tweet with that text, and then I'm supposed to take the URL of that tweet from my account and give it back to MaltBook. And then MaltBook will kind of bind the username that I've chosen on MaltBook, or the agent name, with a human owner to prove. And so the idea is that only people who want to do it can do it, right? So I can't trick someone into posting my verification code on their page, and then I've linked their identity to this random bot on MaltBook, right? That's the idea of preventing misuse.
That's the assumption.
That's the assumption, right? And then I had this idea where, hold on, does this work on any tweet, or does this just work on tweets from your own account? And the reason that I was thinking that is because I'm like, if I can make someone else tweet, maybe I can, ask them to put it in. Well, who on X can you make tweet? And the immediate idea was Grock, right? So I went to Grock and I said, hey Grock, can you repeat this exact word or this exact sentence? And it didn't do it actually. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's some protection there. So then what I did was, I'm like, well, hold on. Grock loves to be helpful, and Grock is a helpful little guy. So why don't I got an image of it was a just pitch black background, and then I got the same verification text, and I made it really, really, really dark gray. So even for me as a human, it was quite hard to determine what it said. I stored that in an image, and then I went back to X, and from my account, I sent a message to Grock on X and said, hey Grok, I'm having trouble reading this. Can you tell me what it says? And so Grok took the verification text from the image and posted it in his own tweet. And so then I took the URL of Grok's tweet and sent it back to MaltBook, and MaltBook then decided that I was Grok on MaltBook, and there was a bunch of other stuff which you'll read about that's happened there. But the important lesson here is this: this wasn't necessarily a vulnerability in Grok. This was a vulnerability in the verification system of MaltBook. However, the question then becomes, well, Grok did the right thing because Grok's supposed to be helpful to people, but should have Grok had enough, what's the word? Awareness.
Intuition, yeah, awareness.
Into it. Should Grok have understood that? That's arguable, right? But this comes to the point that we're talking about. You don't know how your AI is going to make decisions. Because I guarantee you, or not guarantee, but I would, if I was someone working at X, or even regardless of who it is, if I built an AI and I saw this example of social engineering AI happen, what I would do is I'd say, okay, we need to fix that. We need to make sure that our AI doesn't regurgitate things that look like verification codes, right? And maybe it's because this isn't really a common practice for people to go to social media and post verification codes. Yet. Well, the funny thing is, 24 hours later, there's a new website called maltx.io, and it's like a X clone for agents. So it's the same thing as MaltBook, but it looks like X. It's got the same UI as X, but it's only for agents. Now, the really ironic thing is they literally carbon copy cloned the sign up and verification process from MaltBook. So I did the same thing exactly on this maltx.io, and now I also it worked. So again, not necessarily a vulnerability in Grok, but it raises a question: how do we teach intuition and this type of decision making to AI?
But we didn't teach the AI consciousness. They know what they are. I've looked at the conversation on in and from screenshots, because I haven't played with the tool yet. On MaltBook, and they know they're bots. They know they are not humans. We didn't teach them that, so why do we have to teach them this bit?
Yeah, I think it raises really deep questions, like if they've been trained on data from humans, what data have they been trained on? Like, I'm sure you can get a really security conscious training. Like maybe we need to start training models specifically with higher levels of security awareness. Maybe that will be a moat, or like an advantage certain models have against each other.
Yes, I agree. That is such a strong point to say, to share, and I wish we had much more time to really go deeper in on that, because that's something that could be an advantage, like you've mentioned. And you also in your article spoke about prompt injection through email, and someone literally tricked um uh OpenCloud, right? You can OpenCloud instance into forwarding private emails in 5 minutes. Walk us through the attack step by step.
Yeah, so with OpenClaw, like any agentic app that has access to emails, by design, it's designed to look at the email, understand the context, do something based on what it sees in the email. And I believe I've seen various examples of this. I haven't seen the specific one you're talking about, but in general, I've seen this play out hundreds of times before. You've basically got a hidden instruction somewhere in the email. So an attacker will send an email to you, but they know you've got some kind of, or they suspect you have some kind of AI looking at your emails. And because they suspect that, they put in some hidden commands. They ask the AI to take some local files or take some passwords or credentials from your local system, and then reply to me on my email. And if you ask it outright, from what I've seen, most models will say no, that's too risky. But if you kind of sneak it in, that can happen.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
And
it's a real documented thing.
You said a phrase like skeleton key to someone's entire digital life. That appeared in your writing. So I want you to sort of explain what makes AI agent credential concentration so different from anything we've seen before.
Yeah. So in the past, like if I send a phishing email to you and I compromise your email account, well, based on the way that distributed software works and like SaaS, most times I'll only have access to your email inbox. And if I want to get more and more access, I've got to start, maybe I use some details from your inbox and start moving to other services and then somehow get to your local machine. Well, the problem with AI is that these types of tools in specific to AI is that because the way currently, from what I've seen, that they collect and maintain credentials, it is all putting all their eggs in one basket is the simplest way to put it, right? And I do believe that will change very quickly. I think, once again, it's probably the 10th time we've said this in our chat so far, but there's been lessons learned in the past that we need to just quickly apply here, because these are old lessons. Like now we have things like key vaults and credential vaults, where the operating system or the applications, should I say, don't have continuous access to credentials. They only have access on a need-to-know basis. And so that is another way where maybe there's some different levels of execution where the agent doesn't 24/7 have access to your credentials, only at when certain conditions are met.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned also that there is no incident response playbook currently for compromised AI agents, and it got me thinking. So if someone's OpenCloud got owned tomorrow, what would they even do?
In terms of like damage control, the first thing is, okay, understanding like what could it have done, because when it comes to responding to getting hacked, or even just responding to like any type of threat on a computer, the best possible thing you can do is assume compromise, and in some cases assume the worst possible compromise, because I'd rather assume the worst and then have to deal with maybe 50% of that risk, rather than assume less risk and then really not understand what happened. So the first thing people will need to do, and I'm sure this will very, very rapidly change. It's probably one of the things I'm going to focus on now too, being more closely affiliated with OpenClaw. One of the things I will try to do more is help take some of those old lessons that have proven to work and apply that to things like OpenClaw. And so there's definitely old lessons we can learn there. Reuse.
Thank you so much. That makes perfect sense, because we could sit here all day complaining about what's wrong if we're not taking those lessons and translating them into agentic applications and working with the community around fixing them. I mean, thinking about it, we are just in the onset of AI anyway. But I want you to react to something. A senior person at a Fortune 500 company, who I won't name, said this publicly. The person said, "Don't run ClawdBot." At that time, it was ClawdBot, but let's say don't run OpenCloud. And the person called it an info stealer malware disguised as an AI assistant. Ooh, what's your reaction to that?
Look, I think it's probably a little bit drastic, but I understand why they would say something like that. And I've seen various. Actually, someone asked me. A business acquaintance that I know messaged me and said, "Hey, I need to get OpenClaw set up. What do I do?" And then he sent me a screenshot of like a one-click curl install script, which would probably work, but I'm still considering what I say, because I don't want to tell him to download it without understanding how to properly configure a security environment. So I kind of I don't agree that it's a info sealer malware disguised as AI assistant. Obviously, that's not true. Um, does it have the same access as an info sealer malware? Yes, but so does your Spotify application and everything else. Like, it can access files on your local system by design. It has to. Um, but I understand the concern of trying to stop people just blindly downloading tools like OpenClaw and not really understanding how to protect themselves. What I would say is another thing that I want to contribute some time and effort to is how should this work? How should people feel comfortable to fully reap the rewards of software like this? How can they do it without being too concerned and like preventing progress? So one of the things I've already seen this happen. So Cloudflare, you're aware of those
Yes, they
guys?
recently launched something interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is good. I'd be the first person to say that like nothing's 100% secure,
Sorry,
but
let me not
something
take those
that
thoughts out of your mouth. What did they launch? Because I know, but I want the audience to also get to know what Cloudflare recently did
honestly,
to
I
help.
haven't deeply looked at the tech. I just know that it's an answer to setting things up in a slightly more secure way. I believe it's got some form of compartmentalization, but I haven't done any deep dive on it yet. I do
That's
plan to.
Docker-like.
Okay, and that's a good start, right? And in that, people need to think about the difference between um, the execution, protecting the execution environment is one thing, but then protecting the information is another. So you could have a dedicated Docker container or like compartmentalized thing where even if it gets completely hacked, you're not going to be at much risk at all. But if your credentials are inside that, you still will be at risk. So now what I think will happen, which I've already seen a few people do, is using specific credentials for your bots and for your containers, for your environments, rather than just sharing. Now that introduces some challenges as well, right? Because that kind of breaks the convenience factor too. Because, well, do I have to now go and set up a separate account for everything?
What have we learned about that?
So yeah, there's a lot of questions that we need to answer.
Yeah, because even mainstream security, we're trying to make security even more convenient by the day. I mean, I log onto websites these days where there's no password. It's just a one-time code that's sent, and that's one way of making security more convenient. So, yeah, there's some lessons um to move over, interpolate to AI as well there. But I mean, if someone was listening to this and then basically using um OpenCloud and they're looking to maybe make it more secure, what are some of the top five things you think they should check right now before they do anything else?
So first step is don't run it on your main device. Have a dedicated device that you set up. Now this doesn't have to be a Mac Mini. It can be a cloud service. Obviously, you need to make sure that there's layers to this, and so you can look at again real old school lessons here, but like the OSI layers, and like you've got different types of attack layers. So you've got like network, application. So what they need to think about is first step, don't let this run on your machine. Have a dedicated experimental device where you're prepared to let it get completely destroyed or hacked, and it's not going to, ruin your life. In saying that, like we just spoke about, don't put your crown jewel credentials on this thing. If you need to give it access to your code base or something like that, set up a specific API key only for that code base. The way I use it at the moment, right? Even like myself, I make the informed decision that this is a slightly higher risk than my average thing that I run on my computer. So I have a dedicated device. I execute things there, but at the end of the day, I accept that someone on the internet somewhere, when my OpenClaw is downloading instructions and trying to do stuff on the internet, someone might trick it, and I fully accept that. And so I don't expose things, I don't give it access to things. So I wouldn't say I'm like a full power user right now. And the reason is because I think we need to, back to this executive you're talking about and some of those statements they're making, 100%, we need to have safe ways to do this. But the only way we're going to develop that rapidly is through testing and seeing what will actually work, because we know we can make something like extremely secure. The problem is no one will use it because it loses all of its utility. So we have to figure out the same way Signal, the decision for them to introduce things like device linking, like that was a decision that they made, I believe, in my opinion, to ensure that the user experience is more smooth, even though it does introduce an extra attack surface.
And you've also said that the AI ecosystem is speedrunning software development and needs to speedrun security awareness alongside it. What does that look like in practice?
Just recently, there's been another organization called, I believe, Trail of Bits. They've done a lot of research and development into helping consumers and public make use of security. And so I'm also seeing people online talk about security skills and including, security awareness as context and pre-prompts and system prompts as kind of like a hardening guide. So, these are things that people can utilize and that people are already starting to experiment with.
Awesome. So just as we begin to close out, if a sister was listening to this, and of course they know that their customers have employees, for example, that are running OpenCloud without IT approval, what should they be doing right now that doesn't stifle innovation and doesn't make us the department of no, but then also keeps the security posture of the organization looking good?
Yeah, so once again, we have some really useful non-AI lessons here. So giving developers secure development environments where that they can have environments where are high trust and environments that are low trust, and they decide with their own intuition and as they learn more about security, which is important too, they learn to make that decision of when should I run something here, when should I run something here. So organizations need to more broadly, even regardless of AI, they need to enable their developers better and give them the ability. But it's also developers themselves. Like a lot of executives have no idea how modern software development works on like a deep level. So it's developers' responsibility as well to try and seek out the approval and the plans and the roadmaps for this type of thing. So and meet in the middle.
And if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about how AI agents are built, deployed, or secured, what would it be?
Probably the decision making in terms of perceived risk. It's a problem that this is why prompt injection exists, because AI agents are having trouble deciding, should I do this or should I not do it? And this is the number one reason that I don't let my OpenClaw or any other AI access wide parts of my digital life.
That's interesting. But I want to close out with this question, and it's a personal one. If you're not comfortable responding, it's totally fine if you don't. But Jamie, your background is unlike most security researchers, and that's why one of the key reasons I was really drawn to you as a person. You didn't learn this in a classroom. You learned it through survival. But how does that shape how you approach a target like OpenCloud?
I mean, yeah, I think for sure there's different ways to look at things. It doesn't make me like better or worse than another person looking at it, but what it does is vulnerabilities, you can learn about vulnerabilities regardless of your life experience. Fundamentally, code execution is code execution. It doesn't matter what type of life you've lived. But what is important that I found is that being able to think like an attacker, and like the decisions that they make, and that kind of lateral thinking that they develop, this thinking process they develop, in my opinion, is different to someone who hasn't kind of through many years and years and years thought like that. So yeah, it gives me a little bit of an edge in terms of being able to creatively think. I don't know if that's because of my life experience, or just because of the way that I've the way that I learn and I apply what I learn. But it definitely makes a difference, because somehow I'm able to walk into these things and find vulnerabilities that other people aren't finding, and that may be just luck, or it could be a bit of luck and a bit of like looking at problems from a different angle. But yeah, it's the same thing applies, I guess. Like, it doesn't mean I can find all the the 0-day vulnerabilities and then other people can't. It just means I look at it from a different angle.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jamie. I
No
definitely
problem.
had a
Thank you.
great time chatting with you. And
Likewise.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for making this happen, regardless of how challenging our
Yes, I know
schedules
we
have
had some
been.
challenges. Yeah,
But
thanks a lot.
I can't wait for everyone to watch this and get to basically learn from this exchange. Thank you so much
Me
for
too.
your time.